Today on Books vs. Films, we're going to be taking a look at a book-to-movie adaptation that explores our childhood fear of the dark. Anyway, this is my Books vs. Films review of Orion in the Dark.
You know what's weird? It's been a while since I covered something from Dreamworks, hasn't it? The reason I say that is because a good chunk of their library consists of book-to-movie adaptations. Whether it's from a short picture book to an entire series of chapter books to even a comic strip, it seems like Dreamworks has a knack when it comes to adapting books to the big screen. Well, with the exception of The Boss Baby, and trust me, we will get to that one eventually, but for now, let's focus on today's subject, Orion in the Dark. When I first saw the trailer for this movie, I was immediately hyped. So much so that when I learned that it was based on a book, I picked up a copy and read it for myself, curious about how Dreamworks can take a short little picture book and expand it to greater heights.
The results were a mixed bag, to say the least.
On one hand, it follows the book's premise pretty well. On the other hand, the story structure of the movie seems to be all over the place. Going into this movie, I thought I was going to get something similar to Inside Out, with the visual style of Mitchell's vs. the Machines. Something fun, creative, and heartfelt at the same time.
And after I was done watching it, I felt like I got two movies out of this experience.
The first of which is the movie that I was promised in the trailer, and a lot closer to its book counterpart as well. The story revolves around a young boy named Orion who's afraid that everything is out to get him. But the one thing that he's most afraid of is, you guessed it, the dark. He gets upset to the point where he yells at the dark. The dark shows him that there's nothing to be afraid of. Orion overcomes his fear of the dark and even befriends the big guy at the end of the story. It's a cute, fun little storybook with a simplistic charm to it. There's even some pop-up book moments, which I find to be very nice. It's kind of like a cherry on top of a sundae with an added chef's kiss to it. The movie follows the basic plot of the book with some additional characters thrown into the mix. While the human characters are as cookie cutter as can be, I feel like the additional characters that really stole the show are the night entities. Seriously, you can tell that the animators really had some fun when coming up with these designs because they are super creative. There's also times where the movie gets a big laugh out of me, whether the humor comes from how relatable the situations are or how hilariously morbid these jokes can get. Like there's a scene where the night entity Sleep uses chloroform to knock out people and even tries to knock out a baby with a hammer. That's messed up but hilarious at the same time. The closest the book gets to this concept of things going bump in the night is whenever Dark shows Orion all the unexplained noises around the neighborhood. In the movie version, Unexplained Noises is a character of her own, but other than that vaguely loose connection to the book, the night entities are exclusively made for the movie. There's also the light entity who you think will be the main villain of the movie, but in a surprising turn of events, the writers didn't go down that route. Now sure, by the literary definition, he could fit the description of an antagonist, but his intentions don't scream bad guy at all. The only thing I guess makes him out to look like the bad guy is his cocky nature, but that's about it. If anything, the movie relies heavily on a man versus self conflict, which you rarely see that much in movies nowadays, especially ones targeted towards children. You know how I said in my Ant Bully video that the movie focuses on a different lesson entirely, which detracts from the book's core message? Well, in this movie, they brought up the lesson of finding self-worth in a thankless job without undermining the lesson of overcoming your fears. Not only is it a nice balance between the two messages, but it also adds an extra layer to Orion's relationship with the dark. Not to mention that it's very clever the way they utilize these two messages without them overlapping each other. This movie is cleverly written.
Wait. I know what you're doing, Dad.
What do you mean?
That is until we get to the B plot.
Yes, you are.
And this is where my enjoyment for the movie started to deteriorate real quickly.
Okay, so you know how earlier I said that I got two movies out of this experience? Well, this is the second part of the movie, and the worst part of it as well. Now, does this have the potential to work? Yes. Yes, it does. After all, we've seen this framing device used before in movies like The Princess Bride, but unlike that movie where they utilized it in a clever and witty way, this just feels like the movie's trying way too hard to be self-aware with its unfunny, cringy meta humor, and it gets old real quick.
The story's great. I like that you made Light a character too. Is he coming back, or was that just like a guest appearance? Parents love simple stories like that because whatever problem the character has, it all gets fixed. And then they don't have to worry about it anymore. Orion meets Dark. Dark's not so bad. Orion isn't afraid of him anymore. Then there's a dance party.
Ugh. Had this been introduced earlier in the film, I guess I would be slightly forgiving of this, but guess how long it takes for the movie to get to this point? No, really, take a wild guess.
You give up? Well, here's the answer. A little too late to the party, don't you think?
I give it some credit for being ambitious, but in the case of this movie, it really wasn't needed. If anything, it just brings the pacing of the movie to a grinding halt, especially with the third act of the movie, which feels like such a letdown because of its unsatisfying conclusion. Because we come to find out that this is not only a story that a grown-up Orion is telling to his daughter, but it's a story within a story where Orion's now grown-up daughter is telling this to her son, and now the son has to come up with an ending, so he comes up this ending where it's time travel and aliens and seriously, this brings up more questions than answers. Like, was this real? Was this fake? Was this a bedtime story this whole time? Or did this really happen? It's very hard to tell.
But there's definitely one thing I know for certain, and that is the book is the clear winner of this books versus films debate.
You didn't like it. I'm just trying to offer up some food for thought.
So that was my books versus films review of Orion in the Dark. And while the movie is far from being bad, it didn't live up to my expectation, nor exceeded it.
Say what you want about the book story being simpler compared to the movie version, but at least it had a solid story structure to it. The movie, however, seems to be all over the map. And it's a real shame too, because when it's sticking to its main plot, it's really, really good. In fact, I would go as far as to say that it had the potential to be up there with Dreamworks' best movies. But yet it squanders that potential with the side plot that derails the whole story to an unsatisfying ending. So just to be clear, I don't hate this movie. I think the movie's fine. I'm glad I saw it. It's just that I'm disappointed. And quite frankly, this movie left me in the dark.
But if I had to grade this movie on its own merits, it would probably have to be an A+ for the main characters, a C- for the supporting cast, an A+ on the movie's visual design, and a D+ on the overall story, which brings the movie's grade point average to an average C. And that's just me being generous. But regardless whether you like or dislike this movie, I think we can agree on one thing. At least it looks better than the Megamind sequel.
Megamind is back,
I'm kind of a big deal.
and you're welcome.
You're all so lucky to have me as your hero.
Let's just hope for DreamWorks' sakes that Kung Fu Panda 4 is actually good. Anyway guys, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.